everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. I want to remind everybody, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody that wants to share some love. And of course, the StreamYard link is there for anybody that wants to join the panel. Yeah, we're going to go over this birth registration or birth certificate standard stuff again. As it relates to the video last night and the statement, and what I'll do is I'll make a post in my community post and paste that statement from the video last night in my community post, so you have that here. And greetings, 5 Speed. How you doing tonight, Russ?
Good, brother. How you been?
Good, good. Had to take a little break and enjoyed it. And we're
I've
back
been gone for a while myself.
Yeah.
Needed to do a little soul searching and just cut everything out. And you know, it's funny. The things that come to a man's mind.
Well, yeah, that's one of the times when you get to reflect on your thoughts and everything, and that's the biggest step in your own awareness and your intellect. That's what helps you learn, is when you're able to detach from everybody and have that solitude where you can actually think in peace.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, there's one thing I learned on this journey, my friend. One's time is absorbed by the things they love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I try to do everything I can. Have fun in life doing the things I love.
How much time does most people put towards helping their fellow man?
Yep. Yeah.
And I mean, these are straight up facts that will just, cut a motherfucker's lips off that think they know something with the egos and all of that shit. It just blows me away.
Well, and that's why it's important to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Those that think nothing about about anything but the future and where they want to go in all this materialistic world and become narcissistic and let that ego fly, they're not learning.
No.
They're only repeating, and that's the insanity. You repeat the same thing that brings the same results. And in this materialistic world, there are certain things that bring certain results, whether you're a good person or a bad person. All you got to do is follow a pattern of practice. That's a bad pattern of practice if you're not using it for the right purposes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So anyway, we're going to get into the discussion tonight with a couple codes that I've been over before here recently as it relates to correcting the record and our position in doing so. And that first one is the definitions at 5 CFR 575.102. And it says here, and greetings, sister. How you doing tonight?
Greetings, brother. How are you? I'm good.
Good, good. Good to see you again.
Just multitasking.
Greetings, Amon.
Greetings, brother. Both of you. I'm just multitasking.
Good to hear you. Good to hear you.
It's all good.
And so, like I said last night, with the birth certificate, it has to do with federal employment and the presumption there through Social Security. And then that's the Social Security Administration. So we have administrative personnel, chapter of Office of Personnel Management, Civil Service Regulations, recruitment, relocation, and retention incentives, supervisory differentials, and extended assignment incentives. And under this, they have agency, authorized agency official, and then competencies. Competencies means the knowledge, skills, abilities, behaviors, and other characteristics an individual needs to perform the duties of a position. And remember, I did the series on entire executive civil service, And the very first position was chaplain. And the duties of a chaplain that they have to perform have to do with ethics and morals, their characteristics. This is endemic throughout the entire system. Everybody's supposed to have a system, a base foundation of ethics and morals. And then down here it says federal government. This is where we get the federal government, means all entities of the government of the United States, including the United States Postal Service and the Postal Regulatory Commission. Okay. The next one is that, again, Title V, Administrative Personnel, Office of Government Ethics. Government ethics standards for ethical conduct for employees of the executive branch. Basic obligation of public service. Public service is a public trust. Each employee has the responsibility to the United States government. Remember that individual, or you, excuse me, that you is an individual who owes a debt to the United States and its citizens to place loyalty to the Constitution, a corporate charter, laws, and ethical principles above private gain. So they have to use their ethical principles. That's the character that they're supposed to fulfill their job in. Good faith. When it comes to the notice that I drew up last night, or read last night, let me pull this up. And I'm going to switch my screen share. And so we have this notice. Now this notice is going to be going out to all these people here. So when it comes to the federal government, the president's going to get a notice. The U.S. Attorney General is going to get a notice. And they're going to get a notice. President's going to get a notice because he is the executive. The executive. The U.S. Attorney General, he's going to get one because we're dealing with the two jurisdictions, private and public, which is equity and common law. Department of Defense, as it relates to the birth registration, because that's 5 U.S.C. 301 that we mentioned in regards to departmental regulations. And that's going to be according to the Military Board of Contract Appeals. Homeland Security gets a notice that relates to redress for misidentification. And then there's a set of personnel security principles or whatever that's going to include this. HPSD 12, Homeland Security Presidential Directive 12, which relates to the Real ID, and it specifically relates to federal employees and contractors. And that's the implication by any state or government ID, is that you are a contractor with that entity. And this is where we're going to fix that position as it relates to the disposition, wherein Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou was cast from the womb, I sanctified thee. I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations to minister the word of the gospel. That's what a chaplain does. Chaplain literally means little cloak, and the ministering of the word of gospel of the full armor of God. And it has to do with the trading with the enemy. And we're going to read this here, a portion of this here, as it relates to the Secret Life of Statutes, a century of the Trading with the Enemy Act. Benjamin A. Coates from Cambridge University Press. Department of State, Bureau of Consular Affairs, as it relates to domestic classification and that is the Civilian Board of Contract Appeals as well. And that relates to the Secretary of Commerce and Secretary of Treasury that we talk about, which is the board that must discern, 19 U.S.C. 81O, resident presence, that no person shall reside within the zone except federal, state, or municipal officers or agents whose resident presence is deemed necessary by the board, and the board is the Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Treasury. The Judicial Officer Department, which is the Postal Service Board of Contract Appeals, that's the independent and neutral forum within the United States Postal Service as the registered agent, comprising of the judicial officer, the administrative law judge, and the Postal Service Board of Contract Appeals. United States Health and Human Services, as it relates to the estate recovery program for settlement, and it relates to the vital records and vital statistics in the United States, users, systems, and sources of revenue. And that's that chart that we went over a few times, birth certificate chart and death certificate, and how it's monetized. The United States Social Security Administration, Administrative Services, as it relates to the ledger and the statements, wherein they have credits that are held under insurance credits and otherwise unearned income credits, things like that. And this is the thing we're gonna actually audit. That's gonna be your full record with the Internal Revenue Service TIN versus Social Security number, master file with its assignments. Remember, we saw that use of the matrix, and it talked about the use status, and it talks about making amendments to contracts, and that's what nobody does. Nobody makes amendments to the contracts for the use. And then, of course, Department of Transportation for the errored entry, 19 CFR 141.64, review and correction of entry and entry summary documentation. And the reason I say Department of Transportation is because they're the ones that take over internally for the customs for all shipments once they're imported into the United States. Then, of course, the Federal Transit Authority within the Department of Transportation, as it relates to freedom of transit and that international treaty or agreement known as the Constitution of the Universal Postal Union. And then I've got a question here: does diploma implicate such freedom of transit? Does it relate that I'm once I got my diploma from high school, I had received the education to go out upon the world and not just domestically? And then, of course, at the state level, you have the coinciding. Governor is the executive. Then you got State Attorney General, Adjutant General, Chaplain, position versus disposition. Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, Iowa Department of Public Safety, Iowa Secretary of State, Iowa International Trade Administration, Treasurer of Iowa. These all have to do with Department of State at the state level. Dubuque County Registrar, that's where I was actually born. And then the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services, as it relates to the estate recovery program, Iowa Social Security Administration, Iowa Department of Revenue, Iowa Department of Motor Vehicles, and then, of course, the resident stuff here is from your local county and city. And like I showed you last night, I filled out a GS Standard Form 95, Form 3949A, and 13909 as it relates to information referrals and a tort claim. And then all this information here as backup when it comes to my research. So if I end up having to meet with anybody behind closed doors, I've got sufficient evidence and other codes and stuff. And this is just a small portion of it. Many of you guys know. Anything on that yet, guys?
Well, you know me, Keith. I'm always about the simplicity of things. I try to break things down Where do you think all of this falls spiritually?
Well, it's claiming
I
that
mean, when in reference to you, in case you had to meet somebody behind closed doors,
well, it comes
where do you think the spirituality comes in there, or does it?
well, it absolutely doesn't. It comes to one who seeks equity must first come with equity, and this is what I've correlated to it many times. If one wants truth, they've got to come with truth. Well, one wants peace. If they want peace, they've got to come with peace. If they want love, they got to come with love. So if you want spirituality out of the person you're trying to get to help you, you've got to go to them with spirituality. The spirituality is merely just being as truthful and honest as you can, and that includes repenting for your own mistakes and recognizing them first and foremost, so you can explain it to them. Hey, I'm not.
Right.
I'm the one that did the. I made a mistake. Can you help me out here? We're not going to point the finger at them at all, except to say, well, it's only because I made the mistake that the record's wrong, and it's just your job to do the record. So I can't really blame you, but I do have to
Right.
have your help to correct it.
Right. See, my problem is that's kind of why I went off grid for a little bit, is trying to figure out in my own mind, because you know, from what I see in my journey, there's two types of people out here in this world. There's givers and there's takers. There's leaders and there's followers. And, you know, when you spend all your time in a certain thing, well, what did you learn to serve others with in that time, that all that love and time that you put in to all of this bullshit out here? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we really get down to the individual and the spirituality behind it, what does a man really bring to the damn table?
Well,
I have a
yeah.
comment.
Go ahead.
I have a comment to how you started this broadcast or whatever when you were talking about, and then now it's the spirituality. But when you were talking about the chaplain and the federal part, it's almost like what what inside of your mind do you feel that you don't have to become that chaplain to continue what you're doing?
What, as far as the
Is
federal
that question
government,
to
or what?
me or to Keith?
No, it's the key.
Oh, okay.
As
And
far as
in that,
the federal government and me being a chaplain?
right, as in you proceeding with your forward progress and what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah, I was wondering what would make you think that, or why wouldn't you have to become a chaplain to continue in the corrections that you're bringing forward to everyone in the job of the chaplain, or why that
Well, I'm not saying
title
you
is
have to.
in there?
Yeah, I'm not saying you have to. It's just a correlating capacity of being able to come forth and rightly divide the word of truth. And you can do that same thing without, um, quote, titling yourself a chaplain. Remember, folks, chaplain is just a noun. And I use chaplain to refer a better source of defining what I am in recognition of who I am. Because
So
again, like I
see,
said, what I
go
am
ahead.
is a verb. What I
I'm
am
sorry.
is a verb, and that's best defined as a living soul through an adjective and not a noun. A noun is just a further declension of the actual um, verb thing, like administrative and administration. Administrative is the noun, and administration is the adjective. So the adjective shows the verbal action because it says administration. So the suffixes on certain words are going to discern whether it's a noun or an adjective or otherwise.
Wouldn't the interest on the action be the directive?
Correct.
So
The one
see,
that
that's the problem.
the one that's under administration is taking administrative direction. So the man is the one that's under administration, and he should be taking administrative directive from his spirit. But instead, we're taking it from everybody else.
Well, that's my problem. I mean, you know, I'm kind of a free thinker, and these are questions that I ask myself, and I just can't get around them. I mean, I've been out here a long time, and you know, uh, and it just seems crazy to me. The number one rule or the number one law, let's say, was to love one another. And there's 8 billion people out here, and a hand few have convinced all the other ones that there's an acceptance to that rule under these terms and the conditions in these licensings. I call bullshit.
Yeah, and I do
I
too.
call bullshit.
I'm unlicensed and I don't give a fuck.
Me too. Come get you some.
So
So you,
Keith, in that certificate then of birth, and in those capacities that one's placed under as having competence, where has everybody been placed? Is there like one particular, let's say the employee or the job, where did they end up putting everybody when they didn't have the competence to even do the position?
well, the thing is that everybody's being treated as a public official, but they don't have that many public offices. So in the interim, you get to work for places like McDonald's and production lines and other businesses and stuff and get paid by that rate. Otherwise, they have no position for you. And in order for you to be able to survive, you need to have money. So you need to go get another job because you're not getting paid for this one because there's no position for you. But we need you to volunteer your services, you know, to fill out all the paperwork. We can't fill it out for you. You got to do it. No, that's their job. It's their paperwork. It's official documentation. They're supposed to take the information and put it down themselves. We shouldn't. If you're a beneficiary is not required to do anything. So what they do is they change the terms through contract terms of applicant, registrant, things
Couldn't
like
one
that.
look? Couldn't
So
one
when you
look at
correct,
that paperwork as one's wishes, and you're signing off on it?
Well, it's just
If everybody's going to be held accountable, wouldn't that be one's wishes that he got with another brother or sister and conjured up against another? What I mean, we get to the basics, wouldn't it not
but
be?
well, if it was done on purpose, maybe. But we got to
Correct.
understand these people. You got to forgive them for they know not what they do. They
Oh
were
yeah, I'm not blaming
indoctrinated.
them. That's for sure.
Yeah, they were
I want to clear the
indoctrinated.
record there.
Yeah, they were indoctrinated just like us. And it's when we come across these errors and stuff that we have to start speaking out instead of just see. That's the worst part is people that don't do anything about it, knowing that there's something wrong. Bad things
Hmm.
only happen because good people refuse to do anything about them. It's the cognitive dissonance and laziness.
Who was it said tyranny thrives when good men do nothing?
Yeah. And what'd you have, Iman? You wanted to talk about 15
Well,
USC 78X.
yeah, there was something in there, but the first question that I had actually was about when you talked about the chaplain position, that can only be for a man to take that position. Is that not so?
Um, that's the way I would think it, but I believe Iowa has a female chaplain, the first in the nation.
Okay.
So there is
And
a
then the
female chaplain.
okay, so a woman could be based on the jurisdiction of the state and how it is written in their codes, statutes, and bylaws about her position and how she's supposed to perform her duties. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. Now I was reading something else. I'm kind of looking for it. I was reading earlier. I was reading something, and um it was talking about the applicant, but it was talking about the applicant being um in the armed forces. I'm trying to find the code so I can pull it up exactly what it read. And it was talking about uh, the position as far as um, a resident and a citizen of the United States. So
Yeah, see,
I'm gonna
the
let somebody.
residency is a military term as well, folks.
Correct. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna let someone else go on ahead, and I'll look for that information so I can kind of, because I have a question regarding that.
All right, and real quick here, I'll go over that 15 USC 78 you were talking about. It's public availability of information, and remember, 15 U.S. Code is foreign commerce and trade. Records defined for purpose of Section 552 of Title 5. Remember, 552A is individual records. The term records includes all applications, statements, reports, contracts, correspondence, notices, and other documents filed with or otherwise obtained by the Commission pursuant to this chapter or otherwise. The Commission is the Securities Exchange Commission. Remember, we saw that James A. Williams Trust and his private placement with a certificate from the SEC for his birth certificate bond for over $100 million or $100 billion. Disclosure or personal use. Remember the use of the matrix and the use status? It shall be unlawful for any member, officer, or employee of the Commission to disclose to any person other than a member, officer, or employee of the Commission, or to use for personal benefit any information contained in any application, statement, report, contract, correspondence, notice, or other document filed with or otherwise obtained by the Commission. That sounds like to me that the Commission is the one that's going to secure the information and limit its use. So let's go back to this other page, Iowa Department of Administrative Services. And like I said, when it comes to notices, this is who I'll be sending notices out. And when it comes to purchasing contract, financial manager, Department of Administrative Services, Agricultural Development Authority, Agriculture and Land Stewardship and Soil Conservation as it relates to a land patent, Attorney General, Auditor, State Auditor, Commerce as it relates to banking or credit union. When I get a bank account or credit union account, likely a credit union account. Commerce when it comes to insurance and licensing, it will be under that, like I said, the SEC. There's going to be an indemnification bond in private placement. Commerce, utilities, again, correcting the utilities. You're the second billing party. And that's the corrections. Right there. So they're definitely going to get a notice. Department of State, Cultural Affairs, Finance, Payables at iowa.gov. Economic Development Authority, Education when it comes to my high school records and that diploma. Governor's office, got to notify the governor. Like I said, he's the executive. Don't have to worry about office and drug control policy. We don't do drugs around here. Homeland Security and Emergency Management Department. This is Iowa. Department of Health and Human Services, again, Iowa. Department of Inspections, Appeals, and Licensing. This would have to do with the Office of Inspector General on the federal level. Iowa Communications Network, Iowa Ethics Campaign Disclosure Board, Iowa Finance Authority, Iowa Law Enforcement Academy, Iowa Public Employees Retirement System, since I didn't retire, but I did resign, which means voluntarily quit. The judicial system, legislative, services agency, the legislative office of ombudsman, most definitely. Legislative House, Legislative Senate. See what I told you before, you're supposed to speak to your House or your state representatives. Department of Management, Natural Resources, Department Department of Public Defense, Department of Public Safety, Department of Revenue, Secretary of State, Department of Transportation, State of Iowa Treasurer, and Workforce Development. So at the state level, these guys are the ones that are going to get it in relations to that federal level list.
Is all these going to be mailings or emails?
Emails and certified copies. I'm going to send my copy in mail to the governor. I'm going to send him a certified copy with all the attachments and say, hey, you have a duty. Notice to principals, notice to agent, notice to agents, notice to principal. Here's all the people you need to CC this to internally. So when it comes to the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, birth certificate fraud. Let's talk about it. It says the mission of the Office of Inspector General, mandated by Public Law 95-452 as amended by Public Law 100-504, is to protect the integrity oops, where is it? I think it's this one here. Public service is a public trust to ensure that every citizen can have complete confidence in the integrity of the federal government. Each employee shall respect and adhere to the principles of ethical conduct set forth in this section, as well as the implementing standards. Remember that birth certificate standard that doesn't qualify, and yet that's the basis for anybody to get an identification is through the enumeration at birth, where they assign a social security number to an individual so that when he turns the age of 18, he can get said ID or driver's license. So let's continue on. And let me make this bigger for everybody. Is to protect the integrity of the Department of Health and Human Services programs, as well as the health and welfare of beneficiaries served by them. That's their mission. This statutory mission is carried out through a nationwide program of audits, investigations, inspections, sanctions, and fraud alerts. The Inspector General informs the Secretary of Program and Management problems and recommends legislative, regulatory, and operational approaches to correct them. The Office of Evaluation and Inspections, OEI, is one of several components of the Office of Inspector General. It conducts short-term management and program evaluations called inspections that focus on issues of concern of the department, the Congress, and the public. The inspection reports provide findings and recommendations on the efficiency, vulnerability, and effectiveness of departmental programs. Now, you guys remember last night how I showed the birth certificate being valid is impossible. Seems how there's no birth registration in the United States, and no certificate gets registered in the United States unless it be through the SEC, wherein it becomes secured and the information can then be sorted as private or public. So the efficiency of the record is most certainly questionable as it relates to the error of the validity of any birth certificate when there is no birth registration in the United States. A standard requirement, minimum birth registration requirement, standard. OEI's Region 7 Kansas City office prepared this report under the direction of James H. Wolf, Regional Inspector, Purpose is to provide an update on the nature and extent of birth certificate fraud. Background. Legitimate birth certificates provide, let me change here. Legitimate birth certificates provide vital information about the person whose name appears on the certificate. Issuing birth certificates is the responsibility of state vital records registrars and numerous local issuing entities, the local clerk, birth clerk at the hospital, and the county registrar. While originally intended for the sole purpose of birth registration, birth certificates are now used extensively for employment purposes and to obtain benefits or other documents used for identification. Over the last 25 years, a number of studies have addressed problems related to false identification and the misuse of birth certificates. These studies conclude that false identification is a major factor in crime. So let's stop there. If false identification is a major issue of crime, and it's the United States that's providing the false identification through a false process, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It is a crime to bear false witness on your brother. It's a sin. And I don't care if you're fiction or not. The guy behind that component running all them buttons and pushing the information in, and the guy giving it should know better. Many of us don't. So, and the most, if not all, federal fugitives and drug trafficking crimes are associated with false identification. They also include that stolen, counterfeit, and altered birth certificates are often used as breeder documents that allow the holder to obtain documents needed to create new identities. The Office of Inspector General has conducted 3 inspections focused specifically on birth certificate fraud that identified a number of vulnerabilities in birth certificate processes. Excuse me. Because so many federal and state agencies rely on birth certificates to assist them in determining eligibility for services and benefits, it is important that these agencies have current information on the nature and extent of birth certificate fraud to assist them in the proper assignment and protection of benefits. This inspection was initiated at the request of Department of Health and Human Services to provide information which the department could use in responding to responsibilities placed on it as a result of the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996. We use 2 mechanisms to gather information. We gather general information regarding vital records, policies, and the procedures from 53 primary vital records registrars using mail surveys. We also collected more in-depth information through personal interviews with state registrars, fraud investigators, and local and state vital records, passport services, immigration and naturalization services, Social Security Administration, and public assistance staff in 5 states and New York City. We also met with the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, National Center for Health Statistics staff who provided us with comments on the draft of this report. Findings. Fundamental, irreconcilable conflicts. That's those impossibilities I was telling you about that have been implemented despite the fact that it's an impossibility, and now it's caused an error and damage and injury and harm and loss that is irreconcilable, except for the fact that we have a credit system. Surround birth certificate purposes and uses. A certified copy of a birth certificate is proof only that a birth occurred and was recorded. It was never registered. A certified copy of a birth certificate is proof only that a birth occurred and was recorded. It was never registered. Go ahead.
Question that I have. If there is no United States statehood, but like you were talking about these other countries where they have different birth certificate, quote unquote, some of those aren't some of those recorded by registrars? Does that mean they're registered, or they're this equivalent to how they're
They're not the proper registrar. Again,
oh, they're not the proper registrar.
it's required to be registered in the United States. County registrar is not in the United States unless we can figure out and get them to confirm that the county registrar is a entity of the United States themselves, and that
But
by
other
entering that record, that's where the Declaration of United States citizenship was made.
right. So these other countries, are they equating the same process, quote
I have no
unquote, like
idea.
the United States? Oh, okay. Because the question that I have, I know, there's people coming in from different places. I just met a man he was like from Yugoslavia. And there he was talking about birth certificates, but he said on there they signed it by the registrar, would sign when the mother, but they put on there, they don't put the last name of the father. They have the birth given name, and they have like listed like it's a boy. It might be Michael John Boy, and whatever date he arrived, and registrar has their signature and information on there, but they have two signatures on there. So that's the reason I had a question.
Yeah, see,
But
mine has three. Mine has my mom's signature as the informant, and then it's got the doctor's signature when it was recorded, and then the state registrar's signature when it was, or a county registrar's signature when it was received. So it goes on, it says, for that purpose, it may be desirable that the public be allowed easy access to them. However, the agencies and organizations that use birth certificates as proof of identification for employment purposes to obtain benefits or other documents, driver's license, social security cards, and passports, and to assist them in determining eligibility for public assistance and other benefits, may have concerns with how easily certified copies of birth certificates can be obtained. These conflicting perspectives are at the very heart of the birth certificate controversy. Birth certificates continue to be used as breeder documents and are easy to obtain. Virtually all federal and state agencies agree that fraudulent birth certificates are used as breeder documents to obtain the genuine documents needed to create new identities, and that fraudulent birth certificates are easy to obtain. Factors which contribute to their use as breeder documents include the following. Currently, 6,422 different entities issue birth certificates. This large number of state, county, city, township, and other entities that issue birth certificates increases opportunities for fraud, theft, bribery, and other methods of illegally obtaining birth certificates. 13 states allow open access to birth records, which allows virtually anyone to purchase copies of any birth certificates on file.
Wow.
Making easy access for anyone to take the data elements and use them at their whim, huh?
Absolutely. Birth certificates can be purchased without identification from some vital records offices and issuing entities. Birth certificate fraud is hard to detect. Many altered or counterfeit birth certificates and genuine birth certificates held by imposters. Imposters. Congress shall lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. The reasons why these fraudulent birth certificates are hard to detect include the following. Over 14,000 different versions of birth certificates are in circulation. That means the 6,422 different entities that currently issue birth certificates, there were many others over a period of time. So they've changed in form and possession and issue. Nearly 4 million United States births were registered in 1999. Nearly 4 million United States births were registered in Anybody catch that? If there is no birth registration in the United States, then where are they getting the nearly 4 million United States births? There's no record of it. That cannot possibly be a true statistic. So again, I tell people when you do your research and you read this stuff, understand what you're reading and use it for discernment. Don't hold it out as truth, but hold it out for discernment. Security features contained in the paper used to issue birth certificates, as well as formats and signatures, vary among state vital records offices and the many entities issuing them. Technological advances in the internet, scanners, color printers, and copiers make it easier to obtain genuine birth certificates and create counterfeit ones. Between 85 and 90% of the birth certificate fraud encountered by the Immigration and Naturalization Services and Passport Services staff is a result of genuine birth certificates held by imposters. The most difficult fraud to detect. So I wonder if it's not these people that are on the other side of that counter ordering government documents and getting this birth certificate to advance their objectives on that side of the counter and are being imposters and told they can go ahead and sign for us because they're part of the administrative services and we're just some dumb cucks. I don't know. That's what it seems like to me.
Well, shit, maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, I go back to the other side, and okay, let's say all of this is a fact, and all of these, and it has to be done this way. But wouldn't the interest of any currency created be for the benefit of life and not a certain 1, 2, 3, 15, 20 individuals?
You would think so, but that would go to the one creating it. Their intent. I can create money.
But
Everybody can.
I mean, but I wouldn't assume that they could be two different types of creation of currency in the protection of the creation of something.
Well, it's not two different types. It's
It would
one
be the
type.
interest.
Right. It's one type, and one person can have a different interest in their intent than the other guy. So if you
But that
know you're
interest
making
couldn't
money,
do harm, though.
no, it can. If you're doing it to make a profit off the loss of another man, that interest goes out the window. Is that really truly
Oh no,
interested in
man,
good
nothing.
intent? Right. So it goes again to the intent. I can create money as long as I don't create debt with it. When you're using money or when you're using the system to create money that creates debt against another man, that's the wrong intent. Federal and state agency staff report receiving only limited training focused on the detection of fraudulent birth certificates. State practices create opportunities for fraud.
Well, that's
It's
like no different than like the Federal Reserve notes, because of the inundated of these printing presses, these printing stores, printing presses. They made it easier because some people can literally get those devices and utilize them at their whim and can make it look just as authentic as one that's been sent out by a state
absolutely,
commission.
absolutely. That's why the technology we have today is amazing, and it can replicate almost anything. So, state practices create opportunities for fraud. That's a blanket statement, folks. And it's very clear why. They told you almost anybody can get them in your name. It does in anybody's name. It was the consensus of those we interviewed that a number of state practices create opportunities for fraud. Those practices include the following: delayed, amended, and midwife birth registrations that are based on affidavits of personal knowledge, include no documentary evidence, and are not often marked or overlaid accordingly. Delays in matching death and birth records can make the identities of many deceased persons easy to assume between the time the person dies and the time the death and birth records are matched. Questionable physical security situations that create opportunities for fraud, and limited oversight of local issuing entities by state vital records offices. This is why you should only get it by the state vital records office. Never get them anywhere else. I would not recommend it. Birth certificate fraud is seldom prosecuted. Now, let me ask everybody, if birth certificate fraud is seldom prosecuted, and you walk into that court with a birth certificate, wouldn't that seemingly be the most powerful document then? If you're the only one who can have that birth certificate in your name, proving that you are not an imposter? Again, remember, folks, I'm telling you, the only
Reason and logic.
the only way that document of that entitlement, document of title can be perfected is by yourself. Anybody else using it for any purpose other than that would be an imposter. Correct. The certificate is not the actual record. The certificate is what's supposed to actually identify the record as being true and valid. So, virtually all of the federal and state agency staff we talked with indicate birth certificate fraud is seldom prosecuted unless it can be linked to large dollar losses or other punishable crimes. Most staff also indicate that many prosecutors are reluctant or refuse to take birth certificate fraud cases in which the only charge is attempting to obtain another individual's birth certificate or counterfeiting or altering a birth certificate. At the same time, misconceptions exist surrounding the security and integrity of birth certificates. So, as we discussed and as we found out through our research, if there is no birth registration in the United States, and that's a standard requirement, and that you have to be a United States citizen at birth, meaning you have to be a United States business at birth, which is another impossibility. The integrity of the record falls apart at enumeration at birth. Nowhere else. It already happened, folks. The record already fell apart before you even put any data elements into it yourself. But now that you know it, despite the fact that you put data elements into it, you now have the ability with knowledge to go back and correct that for the error that it is, because it's not only inconsistent with the standard, but it is impossible. The standard itself is impossible. If it's required to be registered in the United States and it's not, then it ain't been done. And again, the only place I know you can register such a thing in the United States is with the SEC, as we saw with the James A. William Trust, as an indemnification. You guys got anything on that? That's bringing us to the end of our thing here.
Well, now, if that is the case that the SEC, right? Don't they also have the ability to also prosecute criminal and civil cases based on information that may be admissible or inadmissible? Won't they also have that capability as well? Can't they also? Because if they're supposed to be the ones that doing all the background investigations based on securities fraud, you would think that they would be the one to handle those and be able to catch any fraudulent deceptions that may be going on.
Well, yeah, and that's why they told us, these people are very illiterate when it comes to this, because they have very little training and they don't do their own research. It's not unless somebody like us brings it up to them. And as you can see, evidently nobody has brought this fact up to them yet, despite all of their intense research for this survey and stuff on birth certificate frauds. How come they didn't come across this?
Or is it possible that those seats are controlled by big money?
Well, it could be, but
see what I'm saying? And they just ain't gonna, whatever. But I still think the gig's up for them.
Absolutely. So. It's like I said, when I called down there the other day and talked to Brittany with the Blackhawk County Court Financial Services for the financial index, it was no problem. And that was in the afternoon, and I had it the next day in the mail by the morning. They were Johnny on it. So it's a matter of, like I said, studying to show yourself worthy and approved. You have to learn how to communicate with them, like we spoke about earlier in the spiritual context, and just say, listen, I've got some stuff coming up, and I found some mistakes, and I need a copy of this and this and this. And if you get that to me as soon as possible with this address, it'd be great. Now, most of them have a problem with the address because their system won't accept my 5-line address. So I do kindly ask them to just write it out on the envelope then and send it. They generally don't, but I still get it, and I still know I'm getting it and what I'm getting.
So obviously there's a transaction of everything done with that name and that number. So
yeah, it's an automated.
So what I try to figure out from the spiritual side is it really doesn't have to be complicated. Anything that was done under that name and number, we need to correct.
Right. And the thing that we're correcting, let me pull up my thing here and stop my background. And this is a receipt from today. See if I can get this up here and show you. I went to a store and I got some money out of the ATM. And we can see up here, it says, where is it at here? No, I'm getting a shine on it. Dang it. Okay, you see the AID number right there with my finger? Right here? That's the number off the card. Okay. It's a U.S. debit number. AID. And notice it says U.S. debit here. And then AID. Now look on this other receipt. Oops, wrong one. Where is it? U.S. debit, right there. It doesn't say AID number. It says U.S. debit, but it's got that same number. That AID number is an automated ID. Stands for automated ID. U.S. debit's got that, and that's saying it's a U.S. debit, even though it came off of a card with a different name. And there's the ID number. It's the same thing. It's an automated ID. So it's the use of the matrix, and that card was not set up right according to its use status. It wasn't used for credit. It was used for debit, despite the fact that it got credits. See, it used an electronic transfer system to transfer so many dollars in credits from this account to this account, but then it issued a receipt saying that it was a debit against the United States. How is it a debit against the United States if the credit is already established and sitting in an account and gets debited from that account? It can only happen if that account is a United States account. That's a business account. I don't care if you call it a personal account or a private account. It's a U.S. debit account. It's a business account. And somewhere along the line, they're not giving credit for the credits. They're taking them as a debit.
We need to come in and overwrite their underwrite.
Exactly. That's what I've been saying. You got to overwrite their underwriting, because that's what they're doing, is they're underwriting everything as if though they've got the authority to underwrite that contract. Well, the contract is already set forth, and you just need to come in and overwrite that underwriting, because the contract is insured. They all have to come with some kind of surety bond. You have to put up a bid bond, performance bond, payment bond, and that is covered through a surety. Whichever party's playing surety better know it. And that's the problem. Nobody does. It's all being shifted on you as if though you're the surety. Nobody ever taught you.
But straight is the gate and narrow is the way. I'm telling you.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a fine line there.
And this is one of those lines, like I said, with the cognitive dissonance and everybody thinking that they need to have that ID in their pocket to go about their daily lives. This destroys all of it. Just that one fact destroys the identification system. People asked me the other day on a panel, what do you think if the colored people just quit shopping one day? If not one colored person shopped in a day, it would have an effect. It would alter something in the system. I don't know that it would tear it apart or tear it down or anything, but it would certainly alter it. Same thing with any other class of people. If just a whole class of people just didn't comply or didn't demand a supply for one day or something, it would change. This, if everybody understood this and said, hey, wait a minute, we realize that's an impossibility, we need to change the identification system, they would understand, no, the identification system, like I said, that House Homeland Security presidential directive for the Real ID, it's specifically for federal employees and contractors under the Trading with the Enemy Act. It's to make sure that they're not trading with the enemy. Listen, that birth certificate shows that I was born on this land. How could I be the enemy? Another inconsistency. That paper is actually evidence of my nationality because the process. And by me being able to rebut that process, under American interests, I would think it would be able to bring about a class action suit, but that's not the way it's going to happen, I assure you. Everybody's going to have to learn this independently and start asserting it themselves. Hey, wait a minute. I found out the birth certificate standards are void, ab initio, nunc pro tunc. Anyway,
You know, on that little journey that I took there for a month and a half, 2 months, whatever it was, you know, listening to some music, The Man in the Mirror. I mean, Michael Jackson, the video. I mean, people really need to really think. What is our lack of intelligence, for the better word of it? Just our ignorance to any of this. What we really created in this world that
well, yeah,
that now has to be taken back down. So, you know, I just hope people start to spread a little love in their communities and start building the community back up from the grassroots. And you know, it's all over from there.
yeah, and I don't mind. I don't think it needs to be torn down. I don't
No,
mind if we help them revise it and fix it
I mean, I'm
accordingly.
saying,
You know,
what I'm saying for the communities is for the community members to come together and say, hey, just to assure people that no matter what happens, that, you know, we've got each other's back, or whatever the case may, you know, because fear is the number one thing driving all of this. You know it as well as I know
well,
it. And
I don't know if it's so much fear as opposed to what I've noticed
we'll say the
recently is
fear controls
laziness.
it. The fear
Well,
controls it.
well, and I think a lot of people use laziness as an excuse under that fear, where in fact they're really just lazy. It doesn't have to do with fear. If there's any fear in there, it's fear that they're going to have to do something, and in doing something, they're going to fail. That's the premise. You got to do it. You got to, if you want to learn how to bike, you're going to fail. You're going to fail, and you're going to get on it. You're going to do it. You're going to fail again. You're going to do it until you get better at it, so you don't fail. People don't want to go through that process. It's too much. Well, I'm not going to do it for you. I'm doing it for myself, and you can take heed and follow along. That's the thing about Jesus. Jesus didn't do it for you. He told you to follow my way.
Well, I thought that's how we served. How we served one another was what we had to offer mankind to the betterment of life. So you know, it depends on how deep you want to go with some of this stuff. You know,
Yeah.
I do some heavy thinking, and you know, and it's hard to get around it. And
Yep.
the deeper I go, I mean, the tighter it gets, and straight is the gate, narrow is the damn way. I mean,
Yep.
actions are the interest of something. What is your action? What was your intent? What was the interest? What was the outcome of that? And where did the interest go? And where it's this shit? I can't. The more I can't even believe that America has come to this. That the basic foundation is people have lost it.
Well, that's because of that public education system. See, again, the forefathers of this country came in and they were teaching their own children. They didn't have a public education system. So in teaching their children, they had to teach them expansively about law and many other things, as well as just the reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
So they were bringing their children up, teaching them about trust law, about contract law, about all kinds of things, estate law, probate law, you know, learning how to write your own will, write your living will, all this kind of stuff that people are not taught this day. You have to go to college or go to a bank and talk to a estate planner to learn this stuff, and they're only willing to teach you so much.
Well, in the beginning was Word, so what the hell do I need to write anything down for?
Yep. And with that, we are at the end of our stream. What do you guys got on the way out?
Be the change you wish to see, people. Much love and many blessings. Keith, you know I love you, brother. Good to see you
Absolutely,
back.
right back at you. You too.
Same,
Take care,
same
man.
here, Keith. I found something on the fraud and misrepresentation through the INA, and I'm just gonna send that over to you. I'm gonna just read it later, but yeah, I co-sign the brother, and that's it. It is what it is.
Absolutely. Thank you again, sister. How about you, the fallen? Anything on the way out?
Um, yeah, listen, I think in some way, like you're saying, is like lazy and scared. I think it's a frame of mind.
Yeah, that's why I say I think um, I think a lot of people I think a lot of people are too lazy to put in the time because in putting in the time in relations to my own experience to learn what you need to learn, you really do. If you want it to happen as quickly as possible, you really do need to put everything down. Stop doing what you're doing because that's an error and learn this stuff. Otherwise, you're going to continue on in your life, continuing to sign documents without knowing how to sign them or what they're doing. And you're just going to dig yourself in deeper and deeper. And this is where we find that we end up paying for our father's sins.
Right. That's why I think that a lot of what you were reading about the fraud in the birth certificates, it's almost like I almost want to say it's like two sides of a coin in that frame of mind. It's like, okay, there's that people who will copy them and stuff like that, or you read it as your birth certificate is fraudulent to begin with and it's easy to do just as well as it's like some people could read it as, well, that's the criminal who wants to pretend that they're me and do whatever and get 15 different things for benefits and fraud in that way, and
Right.
then read it where it's fraud just straight you getting one or being given to you in that way and signing.
Right. And that's why I say, the certification is false because there's no handwritten statement of one's intent. So now that we know that it's not in the United States, but rather than being held by administrative services at the state level, we can get a copy of it, send it, and surrender it to the United States, the executive department, with a statement of intent. And that should just it's not like it's going to validate the birth certificate as a United States business, but rather it's going to validate your own position and use of the matrix as a beneficiary, a third party beneficiary that gets to use the matrix for the benefits. That means you get to change the terms and conditions in the contract by amending it with your own definitions, and they can't deny it. Otherwise, they fall out of honor. That's the importance of that document. It proves that you have an ability to put them in honor because they're not in honor yet. And so when you do that, as long as you know what you're doing, you make that statement of intent for indemnification, redemption, whatever, without any accusations or anything. It's an alliance. It's proving the alliance that, hey, I'm the last one you need to be confronting. I'm the one that gives you your powers.
Well,
Or as
that's
you
like
would,
the information. That's like the information I found earlier, and I'm gonna have to try. I wrote it down, but I didn't write the code or the information. But I was looking up the how they say you're Jane Doe and you're John Doe and whatever, and I was looking up something. I don't know what it is, but it came up and it showed, when you look at that UCC1 addendum, and it talks about the men and the women with the arms and the legs, and it had a variation. I think it was like over 14 million. Well, there was something
14 quadrillion.
referencing, yeah, quadrillion. Well, the number was just as large as that number, and it was really breaking it down who the doe is, but I can't find that information. But I'm gonna try to find it and send it to you again.
Yeah,
Because I
do if
just
you.
wrote it down. But it's like, to me, it's like that's how they're utilizing, keeping track of the people, as well as using these birth certificate as a means of this, what they call a monetary fund, to keep this, uh, the cycle going, a perpetuated cycle of enslavement through
Yep,
indebtedness of these bonds, instruments, coupons, and so forth.
yep. All right. Well, with that, we are out, guys. And you know me, I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. That's to say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you and have a good night, folks. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye now.